Unit 24, Field Research 1. Contents: 24.1 Introduction, 24.2 History of Field Research, 24.3 Ethnography, 24.4 Theme Selection, 24.5 Designing Research, 24.6 Gaining Entry in the Field, 24.7 Key Informants, 24.8 Participant Observation, and 24.9 Conclusion. Learning objectives. It is expected that after reading Unit 24, you will be able to first trace the history of field research, discuss the meaning of the term ethnography, select theme of the research and design its plan, learn the ways to enter the field and find those willing to and capable of giving information. Practice the art of observation as a participant. 24.1 Introduction. In this unit, we are concerned with this subject of field research and how it is carried out. Research carried out through fieldwork has an specific connotations in the social sciences. By fieldwork is meant interacting with people in their natural habitats, observing them and collecting socially relevant facts about their lives over a lengthy period of time. This notion of fieldwork should be distinguished from the work of journalists who also go to the field in situ to collect information and prepare news reports. Fieldwork is also different from the work that market organizations carry out, sending their investigators to collect data on the response of users and prospective buyers of particular product or brands. By comparison to this, fieldwork is an intensive data collection on a given subject over a prolonged period of time by staying with the members of the community, maybe a village, urban slum, or an association, etc. 24.3 History of Field Research. The classical meaning of fieldwork has been derived from the work Bronislaw Malinowski. He said that foundation of the method of participant observation for an anthropological fieldwork. Prior to the early 1900, most ethnographic information was collected by the Malinowski called the amateurs, missionaries, colonial administrators and travelers, and survey work of sorts had been carried out measuring skulls and describing physical traits. Malinowski maintained that an ethnographer needed to carry out fieldwork for not less than 1 year in a given community by staying there, learning their language and recording their behavior of the people. In this context, the notion of fieldwork means going out there, or in the word of John Beatty, to study the other culture. Within the Western tradition, an anthropologist was required to take up the study of another society, the ways of which were unfamiliar to her or him, observing, describing, analyzing it in the form of a monograph. This was preliminarily a response to the fact that small-scale tribal cultures were fast disappearing and their cultures, customs, and practices were urgently required to be recorded. Fieldwork thus emerged as a scientific method for collecting primary information from people. The importance of fieldwork was also realized in the early 20th century when sociologists at Chicago University started working through what was then called the case study method. This method also necessitated the collection of extensive case studies from the smaller communities like urban slums within the large cities like Chicago and New York. Through this method, the sociologists posed a major challenges to the then influential scientific statistical method. The Chicago sociologists not only studied face-to-face interactions in everyday settings, they also produced narrative of the social world, thus yielding the method of life's history and the use of documents such as diaries and letters. The mention of a British and American tradition of field research does not imply that there are no other important traditions with their own style of generating data from the field. For example, the German tradition of field research includes the collection of museum-specific specimens along with the other information uses the field material to build regional hypotheses. The French tradition is much influenced by Durkheimian sociology, while the Dutch tradition focuses on the academic training of administrators in anthropology, language, and literature. Madge, Estopi, and Wax have discussed the development of field methods in sociology. Melnowski's emphasis on understanding the native point of view through intensive fieldwork required that anthropologists collected data on the imponderabilia of actual life and of typical behavior, that is, every aspect of culture, in order to have a full understanding of how a culture was organized and how it functioned. In addition to Malinowski's, Franz Boas also popularized fieldwork as an important part of the training of anthropologists. Boas's influence was tremendously as he insisted on the collection of data from primitive societies, not only in terms of their sociological and cultural aspect, but also physical, linguistic, psychological, and geographical dimensions. Therefore, from the early 20th century, fieldwork became an essential aspect of social research, and every researcher of the social world was expected to be initiated to it. The focus on studying a single community through the use of participant observations came to be characterized as ethnographic work. The term ethnography owes its importance to the notion of observation and descriptions of social behavior in a single community. In India, most anthropologists focused on village for intensive study. For instance, Srinivasa's study of Rampura is a good example of field based on research work. Over time, the definition and character of fieldwork has undergone tremendous change in keeping in line with the changing socio-political context and the theoretical advances in the field. The idea of field has moved away from studying another culture to studying one's own culture, from a very small unit to a larger social unit. Though the notion of going to the field is still popular among social scientists, it does not evoke the image of a bounded community. Today, we find social scientists not only studying villages, caste, tribe, but also cooperatives, NGOs, cinemas, markets, the homeless, children, and even literature. Social scientists today carry out multi-sited field research, producing monographs that are sensitive to contesting perspectives on reality. Clifford and Morocco's 1986. 24.3. Ethnography. The word ethnography is used to refer to empirical accounts of the culture and the social organization of particular human populations. Ethnography is, on the other hand, understood as a way of doing research which studies people according to certain procedures and rules in their natural settings or fields to capture the social meaning of their everyday life. This indicates the intensity, field-based, and qualitative research of human groups through participant observation. Ethnography may also refer to an academic discipline that involves the comparative study of ethnic groups. Often, a distinction is made between micro and macro ethnography, sometimes referred to as general ethnography. See box 24.1 on differences between macro and micro ethnography. Box 24.1 Differences between macro and micro ethnography. Macroethnography attempts to describe the entire way of life of a group, in a contrast to the microethnography that focus on particular aspects and particular points in the larger setting, group, or institutions. Typically, these points are selected as they represented in some manner salient elements in the lives of participants and in turn in the life of larger group. A second fundamental difference between the two is that the former analytically focuses on more upon the face-to-face interactions of the members of the group or institutions under investigation. Despite the differences, they both share the overarching concern for everyday community life from the perspective of participants. Often both complement each other. O'Reilly recommends a minimum definition of ethnography in the following words. It is an iterative inductive research that evolves through the study. It draws on a family of methods involving direct and sustained contact with human agents within the context of their daily lives. The field worker watches what happens, listens to what is said, asks questions, and produces a richly written account. This accounts the irreducibility of human experience, acknowledging the role of theory as well as the researcher's own role. Ethnography views humans as part object and part subject. Despite the existence of a plural methodological positions on the representations of the field and its analysis, the methods of fieldwork have not changed much. In other words, there are certain standard methods and techniques of carrying out fieldwork. Many researchers recommended maintaining a value neutral position, neither imposing their own views nor taking any stand on social or political issues. However, a number of social researchers have argued against this facade of value neutrality. Feminists have worked out a research orientation comfortable to both the researcher and the subjects. The researchers listen more and talk less. Orientation has humanized the research process, insisting that the researchers become both involved with their subjects and be reflexive about their thoughts. Box number 24.2, Assessing the Domain of Feminist Discourse. Ursula Sharma says, in any areas, male and female experience do not diverge and there is no specifically male or female model. But also a little further she contends. So it is not just a sensitivity to the presence of women, which is required of the ethnographer, but also sensitivity to the difference between the different kinds of situations and to the correspondingly different ideas and experience which will be expressed within them. Shirley Adner adds to the above and notes these words with the stress which has been laid on the significance of identifying the relevant universe or domain of discourse for an understanding of muting. 24.4, Theme Selection. Although there is a lot of flexibility in ethnographic process, unlike the survey, field research still needs to be planned, coordinated, and systemized. Prior to visiting the field, the researcher carefully prepares a research design outlining the issues involved, such as the theme of the research, the questions to be asked, the data collection techniques to be used, the use of triangulation, the techniques of data analysis, and the ethnical participants to be taken care of. The popular notion in the social sciences have been that the field research should not be preceded by a well-formulated hypothesis, as the field itself was expected to throw up questions. The anthropologists were expected to start their fieldwork tabula rasa, like a blank slate, for she or he did not want to be ensnared by any prejudices, stereotypes, and preferences. However, the newer understanding suggests that the research design is critical for ethnographers, as it guides the plan for the project. This design is made to allow flexibility and impromptu decisions making in the field. That is, it permits unanticipated changes in the plan as the problem arises. A piece of research is seldom undertaken with a neutral reason. The selection of a research topic typically derives from some researcher-oriented position. Furthermore, all women or men are the products of social groups where values, moral attitudes, and beliefs orient people in a particular manner. The use of personal biography or deep familiarity with a subject has become more common and accepted by ethnographers. Maintaining the facade of neutrality prevents a researcher from ever examining her or his own cultural assumptions or personal experience, while subjective disclosures by researchers allows the reader to better understand why a research area has been selected, how it was studied, and by whom. For example, if a nurse studies cancer patients and explains that her or his selection of this topic resulted after one of his family members contracted the disease, this does not diminish the quality of the research. It does not, however, offer a keener insight about who is doing the research and why. It will provide the reader with a greater understanding about why certain types of questions were investigated while others were not. Today, many researchers choose to work on problems relating to development issues, gender, environment, human rights, which reflects instrumental concerns in terms of the availability of funds and job possibilities. Presenting subjective disclosure or giving voice to the researchers provide insight into the world of research. Everyday realities are heavily influenced by human feelings, and presentations of this feeling is legitimate. Besides the personal or theoretical interest in the topic, the feasibility of field research should also be considered. For instance, in northeastern states of India, field research may not be easily owing to insurgency. Similarly, in some districts of Bihar and Andhra Pradesh, it may be difficult to carry out the field work because of the rise of the Naxalite movement. Reflections and Action 224.1. Read Chapter 7 on Ethnography and Product by Gerald D. Bernman in V.K. Srinivastava's edited book, Methodology and Fieldwork. Write a short note on ethnographer's craft, and on the basis of your reading and note, make a tentative selection of a theme of your research. Give reasons for selecting this theme and explain how its theoretical and practical aspects in about 500 words. 24.5 Designing Research. Brewer discusses the general plan for ethnography research designs, outlining the major features of the topic, including the aims and objectives of research. In box 24.3, General Plan for Ethnographic Research Design. First, the choice of research site, field, and the form of sampling employed to select the field and the informants. The resources available for research, including money and time. The sampling of time and events to be experienced in the field, that is, what events the ethnographer wants to cover, and a general sense of time management. Methods or technique of data collection to be used in the field. Entering the field through whom, how, negotiating rapport and trust. Nature of likely adoption of roles depending upon one's age, gender, status, and class. Forms of analysis to be used specifically for both quantitative and qualitative details. Withdrawal from the field and the form of dissemination that will be used to report the result. Ethnographic research is not a particular method of data collection, but a style of research that is distinguished by its objective, which are to be understand the meaning and activities of the people in a given field or setting. An approach which involves close association with often participations in this setting. Field researchers to be begin with a general notion of the problem or issues that interested them, have a sense for the setting that will be relevant for examining these problems or issues. Some formulate tentative hypotheses, while research questions are rarely pre-formulated in great details. Research questions and theoretical issues emerge as the setting is explored. Thus, field setting must be designed and access to the setting obtained. There arises the question of gaining entry into the research setting. The decision has to be made whereas to enter the field openly as researchers or to conduct research covertly without revealing the actual purpose of beginning in the setting. The ethics of covert research are continually debated among field researchers. Access to the research setting also relate to issues of relative reactive effects, that is, researchers' presence leading to changes in the setting. This form of social research uses several methods of data collection such as participant observations, in-depth interviewing, the use of personal documents, and discourse analysis. Since this research combines many methods, it employs triangulation, a term coined by Denzim. Researchers must design on the roles they will occupy in the setting. Complete observer as a participant as observer, or complete participant. Data collections involve carefully watching, listening, and recording the details of everyday activities in the setting under the study. Further, the process would involve translating this observation into systematically organized data. NGOs and development agencies have popularized a variant of fieldwork which owes much to the classical notion of studying people in their natural setting and take the people's point of view. Their fieldwork practices, however, differ considerably in methodology as well as in strategies. Fieldwork carried out by NGO workers often is project-driven, to be completed in a short span of time. They therefore have devised shortcut, quick data collection techniques, ignoring the non-stated detailed meaning of ordinary activities of people. Hence, the concern is more with the data collection of a special kind and its description. This kind of exercise have been termed by various concepts like participatory rural appraisal, rapid rural appraisal, etc. We will return to a discussion of this technique later in the unit. An important point which needs to be noted here is that these strategies are shaped and situated for certain specific goals and not driven in search of knowledge as ethnography aims at. 24.6 Gaining entry in the field. The researchers has to enter the field carefully. Entering the field is often dependent on factors like the nature of the field and the social background of the researcher. In earlier days, anthropologists and sociologists, as white men and women, entered tribal colonies as masters, administrators, missionaries, and travelers. In developing countries like India, the field researchers is often a middle class urban educated person. Race, caste, ethnicity, age, and gender are other important factors in determining the course of successful entry into the field. Leela Dubey describes how, in three different phases of fieldwork in her career, gender, martial status, age, and social status were crucial in making a rapport with the respondents. Mistakes in entry may endanger a field worker's success. Proper entry facilitates rapport. Important persons located at entry points to the field are called gatekeepers. To gain entry, one has to make use of formal and informal contacts. Previous acquaintance and introductory letters from research institutions or sponsoring agencies are helpful in gaining entry. The reputations of sponsors and support of gatekeepers helps in establishing authenticity. On the other hand, the researchers must keep in mind that one's behavior affects one's reputation. Entering the field by not seeking permission from gatekeepers can cause problems for researchers. Also, as a researcher enter a field through gatekeepers, she or he leaves it after informing them. In studying the whole community, the most open point of entry here among us those who share one's social class background. But not all contacts at a given level are of equal value. At an early stage, the researchers tries to identify those in leadership position in the hope that they will provide useful contacts and even informal sponsorships. After gaining the acceptance of some key people, the researchers then attempts to participate in the way that they establish an acceptable personal identity, making it possible to move beyond the limits of an initial sponsorship. In the early stages of project, when the researchers is still consolidating a social bias, it is not advisable to formalize others' methodology. When one is successful in establishing the social base on one can get informations without even asking questions. The first contact with potential participant need to be the right tone by taking away fears, inspiring the potential participant with trust and making them interested in taking part in the research project. If one establishes contacts through one's kith and kin, it's easier to get accepted. However, to associate oneself with a particular family might restrict one's freedom of movement. The first thing people do is to locate the researcher in a particular position. The place where one is located must be acceptable to those who wanted to be studied. For example, one cannot identify with him caste or low caste only. One has to divide equally to have a comprehensive study of the situations. But at the same time, it is impossible to claim to know anyone on an equal footing. One makes a good impressions on people and win their acceptance when one is honest and truthful about one's family background, when local people inquire about it. A researcher takes on the role of a friendly stranger in the field. On entering the field, one ought to feel at ease and make others feel at home. The first day in the field is important as the researcher tells the people about her or himself and what brings him in their midst. Great care is taken not to evoke apprehensions in the people's mind. As a researcher establishes contact with individuals in the field and start becoming familiar with them, he has to avoid making sides, causing offenses to anybody or interfering with their way of life. A researcher is neither a revolutionary or non-missionary. She or he is observe them without trying to reform or convert them into parts and participate with them with a view to observing, experiencing, analyzing a different life different from her or his life. In order to perform one's role well, a researcher has to establish good rapport with the people one is studying. To establish rapport, one may reside with the subjects and familiarize oneself with the surroundings. It is essential to establish one's bona fides and reputation as a good person A researcher's acceptance as such would facilitate unguarded neutral responses. For gaining insights, the observer develops empathy with her or his subjects. Empathy is the ability to put oneself in one other's position and imaginative experience their through thoughts and actions. A researcher is not indiscreet, does not carry tales from one person to another, and does not let her or his subjects feel threatened. Without competing with them for status and interacting with them wherever and whenever available, a researcher is not in a hurry and works out personal equations with some persons and through them with others. From this purpose, one has to develop skills in establishing contact with the people. A researcher enjoys meeting people and talking to them and does not feel irritated or annoyed with them. Handling situations tactfully and gathering information without become controversial in the field. A researcher does not accept all their statement as at face value and collaborates the same with others, checks them up and draws one's own conclusion. Even though a researcher establishes close relations with those who are friendly, too much of its familiarity or intimacy is avoided since that impedes objectivity. A researcher is aware of one's own limits and withdraws from a relationship before they become emprising. Initially, concentrating on one's or two key informants, a researcher gradually approaches others. A few people may wish to keep themselves away from the research, while he or she may also have to keep in a distance from some in order to establish rapport with others. Those who were reticent initially may not be so later. 24.7 Key Informants. Not all contacts are of equal value. At an early stage, the researcher tries to identify those in leadership positions in the hope that they will provide useful contacts and even informal sponsorship. To handle initial relationships, one locates a guide or a key informant. Guides are indigenous persons who found amongst the group and in the setting to be studied. They need to be convinced that the ethnographers are the ones they claim to be and that the study is worthwhile. The worth of the study must be understood and be meaningful to the guides and their group. The key informant must be convenient that no harm will befall them or other members of the group as a result of the researcher's presence. The guide or the key respondent can reassure others in the community that the researchers are safe to have around. One is advised not to take the leader of the organization or community as the key informant, for the leader may be misinformed or not aware of certain things happening among the commoners. Sometimes persons who are willing to be guides or informants turn out to be restricted to their groups. Some may distant from the group or may be disliked by others. The field workers are advised not to choose such persons to be their guides or key informants. Ideally, the choose guides or key informants should be well trusted and liked by the others in the group. Consequently, the snowballing of guides and informants may assist ethnographers in their maneuverability while in the field. Snowballing refers to using people whom the original informant introduces as a person who can also vouch for the legitimacy and the safety of the researcher. The larger the ethnographer's network or the reliable guides and informants, the greater their access and ability to gain further cooperation. Eventually, the need for specific guide decreases as the network of respondents growing in size and research are able to begin casual acquaintanceship by virtue of their generally accepted presence on the scene. Reflections and action for 24.2. Continuing with the theme you selected in Reflections and Action 24.1, after reading the section 24.5 to 24.7, prepare a research design based on the name of your research and decide how you would like to gain the entry into the field and approaches the people there with a view to identifying key informants. Write a short note and include the following details in it. Design of my research. How I will gain an entry in the field. How I will identify key informants. 24.8 Participant observation. Every day seeing has to be distinguished from observation, the latter being more focused with the purpose and is done to understand the phenomena. Social research gives a specific place in observation as it is considered to be one of the fundamental tools to study people's behavior. exemplified very well as its origin is in classical British social anthropology and Chicago School of Sociology. The positivist tradition places a good deal of importance in their method of data collection, as it assumed that the social behavior is observable and amendable to the sensory perceptions. The other method through which researchers collect data is interview. Observations allow the researchers to understand the people and their behavior through direct, focused, non-verbal observation in their neutral setting, whereas in the interview the focus moves to verbal communication. Observation is used as one of the primary techniques of data collections in sociological fieldwork, which can be both intrusive, that is a participant, and the non-intrusive, that is as a non-participant. Those researchers whose subject of inquiry does not necessarily involving mixing up with people's employ the non-participant type of observation. For instance, researchers can observe students or teacher interactions over a period of time without interfering in their type of interaction. The prerequisite for such an observation is working with an observation schedule where a list of topics is mentioned, guiding the researcher to specifically observe certain types of behavior. Non-participant observation has been found to be more useful in complex social situations. Another term of quasi-participant observation is also used in literature to imply spatial situation participation of the observer in the social life of people. Box 24.4 Participant Observation. Participant observation entails data gathering through participants in the daily life of informants in their natural settings. As social researchers watches observers and talks to people in order to understand their interpretations, social meaning and activities. The classical notion behind such practices is to discover the gap between what people think and do and say. The researcher adds to the dimensions of his or her personal experience of sharing the data life of those under study. The method of participant observation as enunciated by Malinowski required the researchers to detach oneself from the people and interpret their behavior. Today, however, subjective positions of which Clifford Geertz is the pioneer maintain that main instrument of data collection in participant observation is the researcher. Malinowski saw observation as separated from the descriptions, while Geertz insists on interpretative understanding as the link between observation and description. Malinowski, representing the positivist tradition, emphasized the need to have a detached view of things and of social life of natives, whereas Geertz, the ethnographic exercise, is an exercise in thick descriptions trying to interpret meanings in terms of what people understood and think about and how they describe their behavior. Here the understanding is essentially intersubjective, as the observer is immersely in the social life and participate in actual terms. The ethnographer is required to develop certain specific personal qualities to maintain a balance between the insider and the outsider. Burgess identifies others' personal abilities to be able to share in lives and activities of other people, to learn their language and meaning, to remember actions and speech, to interact the range of individual in different social situations. Brewer 2006 writes that there are two ways in which the social sciences use participant observations to understand the world as it is seen by acting within it and to reveal the taken for granted common sense nature of the everyday world itself. The former is the traditional usage in the social science, whereas the social groups or specific fields are studied from inside. However, the development of the 1960s of ethnomethodology in sociology and some new forms of interactionism led to an interest in the common sense of methods and procedures by which routine activities are accomplished. Such researchers are, among many things, studying the organization of observation or conversations, decisions making in an organizational setting, even walking and sleeping. In some parts of the participant observes these fields which she or he already a part. The requirements and problems of using participant observation as a method are very different from those for whom the setting are unfamiliar, as in the traditional case. Sometimes an extent of role is utilized to explore the dimensions of new settings field in which the role neutrality locates the observer. A good example in Cohen and Taylor's use of their role as part-time teachers to study the prisoners and prison life. The strategy of observation is in most roles can be covert and overt, and the researcher needs to have special skill in order to successful. In new roles, for instance, the observer has to win the confidence of people, reconciliate into the practices and values of the group, and spend a long time in the field to have a full experience of the activities and events. If the role is covered, the observer should be dedicated, tenacious, and maintain the presence of an insider. Depending upon the field situations, the researchers often has to make a decisions about nature of participation required. Situations condition whereas not to be participated, and to what extent. In such contexts, researchers, instead of getting total observed in the field situations, choose to selectively participate. Such actions have been constructed as quasi participations in social science fieldwork. Participant observations involves not only observations, but the researchers use triangulation, that is, use a number of techniques like observation, genealogies, interviews, questionnaires, schedules, life histories, case studies, oral studies, and today even participatory rural appraisal and rapid rural appraisal (PRR) to collect both primary and secondary sources from the field. Although relying more on qualitative research, quantitative details are also used to sustainable arguments and construct case studies. Participant observations, therefore, is an arduous and tough processing of data gathering and cannot be replaced by smash and grab anthropologists. Ethnographies. At the heart of this method is involvement and detachment. On the positive side, the success to social meaning, shared beliefs and values, and notions of everyday activities that once get through this method is difficult to get through by any other technique. The scope and the limits of participant observations are, however, constrained by the physical limits of the role and locations of the researcher. Since this method is most useful in a micro settings, the generalizations arrived at reflect a partial picture. The reflexive researchers recognize the value of their views as significant, especially in articulating the linkages between the micro and macro. Reflection action for 24.3. Read for 24.3 of the unit and play the role of participant observer for the period of 1 month only at your study center in order to generate information on the level of interactions between the IGNOU students and the center. Based on your experience as a participant observer, write an essay of 500 words on the art of participant observation. Exchange your essay with the essay of other MSO to learners at your study center and discuss each one other's experience of participant observation as a mean of gathering information for understanding the social reality around you. 24.9 Conclusion. Unit 24.24 has introduced you to the vast theme of field research, which is the mainstay of generating new information about social world, and sociologists and anthropologists try to understand, explain. It has traced in brief the history of field research and discussed the subject of ethnography. Further, it has been elaborated on the issues of selecting the research theme, designing the research plan, and gaining entry into the field. Talking about the main source of deserving informations in the field, Unit 24 has explained what is to be a participant observer and subsequent use of this experience at the time of analyzing one's field data. This detailed introduction to field research has paved the way for discussions of field research methods in Unit 25, to which we will now turn. Further reading, we have RFLN 1984 Ethnographic Research, A Guide to General Conduct. Srivastava, V.K. Srivastava, Methodology and Fieldwork, Oxford University Press. This is the end of the chapter 24. Thank you very much.